Good morning. Thank you to participate in this afternoon at this seminar. The narrator today, the narrator is Gaurav Kumar. He come from India, and he is a student of the master's degree active in Unimont in valorization and valorization and sustainable development of mountain areas. He talk about the Alpine in the climate change in Alpine areas. Professor Giorgi, the responsible of the Unimont Pole and the president of the bachelor's degree and the master's degree, arrive after and to say thanks to Kumar to decide to participate, and because now she's in Bolzano to institutional to do institutional activity. Thank you, and Gaurav, can you start?
Thank you, Alicia,
Thank you
for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My topic today to present is Alpine mountain ecosystems, a climate-sensitive, fragile environment. So I would basically talk more about my personal experiences in the Himalayan mountain ranges in India. I come from India, and as Alicia said, I'm studying mountain ecosystems here in my master's program. So I would like to discuss my previous experience in the Himalayas through this presentation. So, yeah. So as there are bachelor students, so I expected to start with the with the most basic terms and terminology. So I hope everyone is aware of the term environment, the term ecology. I mean, environment constitutes everything in a given system which has a certain flow of energy during interaction, and it comprises living as well as non-living parts in a system, biotic or abiotic. I hope you understand biotic and abiotic. And ecology is another term which comprises the study of systems which include all organisms, functional processes, patterns of relations between organism and their environment. And yeah, moving forward. Yeah, so these are the levels of organization in our environment. It basically starts with the atom level to the cells, molecules, tissue, organ, organism, and goes right up till the biosphere. So as you would understand, you know, there are feedback loops in the ecosystem. It's also called, sometimes we have positive feedback, sometimes we have negative feedback, and these the levels of organization in our environment, you would understand, like, as it goes increasing, you know, for instance, biosphere comprises all the other ecosystems below it. So these are all the various interactions ongoing in the ecosystems, and that when we define by a certain parameter, then we call it as a separate system. For instance, you're aware, you know, that cell is a more micro level system, and the tissue and organs are comprised of cells, and they are a more broader system. Similarly, in our environment as well, when we go up in the hierarchy, for instance, we start with organism. So organism is the first level of a system, and group of organisms would comprise a population. Then would go a community, which will have a certain trait, as well as ecosystem, which comprises the interaction of various communities. So I'm sure you must be aware with these terms. So I started considering maybe I should start from the most beginning. Yeah, next slide, please. So alpine ecosystems, some very basic information I would like to give before moving forward. It is a zone above the tree line, usually, irrespective of latitude. There is no homogeneity in the latitude of alpine ecosystems across the world. They vary from place to place. Alpine ecosystem is the term also used commonly for mountain ecosystem, but it's a general use of the term. And now coming from the range of alpine ecosystems, it can start from 1000 meter in the tundras and go as high as 5000 meters in the Himalayan ranges. And usually alpine ecosystems are characterized by rocks, screes, ridges, gullies, water flows, and lakes, etc. And now let's discuss with the issues facing the alpine ecosystems. Now, as we are aware, with the ongoing environmental change, the rise in atmospheric carbon content, largely through anthropogenic emissions, has led to alteration in the precipitation patterns, snow cover, permafrost, which is also present in alpine ecosystems. I hope you are aware of the term permafrost. So it is basically subsoil which is frozen. The water content is frozen, and that is referred to as permafrost. And then now climate warming is well documented now that it induces species to migrate, particularly in the alpine ecosystems. The species migrate to the higher elevations, and the alpine species are usually adapted to a colder climate, and any warming, excessive warming, prolonged warming may also lead to a loss of the species in alpine ecosystems. Yeah. So these are the alpine zones of the world. As I said, that they are not homogeneous. They vary from place to place. So you would observe in tundra biomes, in tundra, it can start from as low as 1000 meters. It goes to, you would observe in Himalayas, in the Himalayas, it is approximately around 5000 meters. As it continues varying, the Andes has a different height. In the Australian alpine zones are different at a different height. So these variations, there are reasons for these variations. For example, in higher latitudes, the climate is usually very cold, and you would find, for example, in tundra biomes, you would find an alpine ecosystem starting as low as 1000 meters. And if there is the region is tropical, which is usually warmer, so then you would find an alpine ecosystem at higher elevations where the cold is more and the ecosystem is suited to that kind of a temperature. Yeah. So this is the global distribution and bioclimatic characterization of the alpine biomes. You would see in red, it is visible. These are the alpine regions of the world. It is in the Himalayas, in the Tibetan Plateau, Russia, and in Southern America, Northwest Americas, Europe, in the Norwegian region. So these are the alpine ecosystems. And this is the map which is representing. I took it from a research article. So it shows the A section shows the spatial distribution of alpine areas based on a 30-meter spatial resolution map. I hope you understand the spatial resolution map. So it is a map which has a grid of 30 by 30 meters. And now the figure B shows the distribution of tree line elevation values along the latitude for 326 mountain ranges worldwide. So with this map, the NDVI, maybe it's confusing. If you're aware of NDVI, it's a remote sensing terminology. So NDVI represents vegetation cover. So the full form is normalized difference vegetation index. So through this map, they are showing that what kind of, these 326 mountain ranges represent what kind of vegetation cover. Similarly, the extent is also shown. For instance, in Asia, you have the highest presence of alpine ecosystems, which is at as high as 73%. South America is 15%, North America is 9%, Europe is 2%. So one thing which should be more clear by now, that alpine ecosystem does not comprise generally, I mean, the entire mountain ecosystem or a simply cold area does not imply that it is an alpine ecosystem. It has a certain range. It has a certain elevation. For example, one parameter was it is usually found above the tree lines. So there is a difference in that. Yeah, so this is the global distribution and bioclimatic characterization of the alpine biome. So as you see on the right side is the vegetation cover maps. NDVI usually refers to vegetation cover, as I already said. So now you have various regions in Alaska, Eastern Himalayas, the Scandinavia. So you can see these alpine ecosystems, what kind of vegetation they comprise, and there is a difference. So yeah, so I'll move forward to that. This was just for representation purposes that I wanted to show how alpine ecosystems are spread across the world. So now I'll come back. I'll come to the Indian Himalayan region. So it is one kind of an alpine ecosystem. I belong to India, so I've worked extensively in the Indian Himalayan region. So I would talk about this more now. So this is a physical map of the region. So you would see this is the Himalayan mountains, and these are the river ecosystems which are being released from the. These rivers are largely glacial fed rivers coming from the glacier melt streams, and they are very important. I mean, a billion, not billion, but at least I think 0.3 billion. Yes, at least approximately 0.3 billion people are dependent upon these river ecosystems for water, for their irrigation needs, and thereby it's largely a very, very important ecosystem. The alpine ecosystem in Himalayas does not have an impact only inside the Himalayan mountains. The impact goes as far as in the plain areas. As you see, the rivers are moving ahead. So yeah, these are some basic facts about the Himalayan ecosystem. The administrative entities where it belongs in India is a federal structure with various states, so which states comprise it. And then it is also one of the global biodiversity hotspots. Himalayas are global biodiversity hotspots. Maybe I'm not right, but there are probably more than 20 biodiversity hotspots in the world, and Himalayas is one of them. Then, yeah, the glacial components of the Himalayan region are very vulnerable to the climate change on account of increasing temperatures and alteration in the precipitation patterns. So some now anthropogenic activities like land use practices, hill cutting, deforestation, pavement of roads through these sensitive ecosystems exacerbate landslides. Rising trend of temperature is already mentioned in the Himalayas, which have already been documented now, which is causing a lot of havoc in the region. So these are more facts about it. Yeah, so climate change has already led to the decline of snow cover since the 1960s in the Himalayas. And flood events have become, the intensity of flood events has really increased during this period in the Himalayan region. Most common type of flood is called flash floods. Sometimes we have cloudburst or a glacial lake outburst flood, which an entire glacier would break and release massive volumes of water and destroy a lot. So, and some characters of the Himalayan mountains are valley type glaciers, gorges. The orography of Himalayas is such that it makes it really vulnerable to flash floods on account of the gradient, the slope, the height of the Himalayan mountains, and millions of residents who are settled in these areas. And the remote location of the mountains makes it even more challenging to predict the precise position and intensity of these cataclysmic events in advance. And this further exacerbates the impact of natural disasters in the Himalayas. As we know that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has already reported a rise of 1.09 degrees in global temperatures in the last decade as compared to the pre-industrialization levels. So it is bound to increase the frequency of extreme weather events. Climate change coupled with poor adaptation practices is increasing the vulnerability of the Himalayan ecosystems. And the scientists in India have already reported significant alterations in the rainfall patterns, particularly in the Himalayan region. So yeah, so now I'll come to my journey in the Himalayas and what I have seen myself. So this is a very important valley. It's called Gangotri Valley. It's in a state called Uttarakhand in India. So it's a very high valley, and you would see the gradient is already visible. It's like the gradient is very high, and the altitudes from where this picture, I suppose it's I do not know in meters, but it's like 17,000 feet is the altitude. So we'll explore more. So this valley is located on an average elevation of 3,000 meters. It starts with around 3,000 meters, and it is characterized by a glacier called Gangotri Glacier, which is the source of a very important river called Ganges in India. It's one of the longest rivers of India, and this valley is rich in angiosperm flora, rich biodiversity, pine forest, wildlife like snow leopards, mountain goats, etc. are present in this valley. And it is highly tourism centered. There are several temples in this valley, which is visited by thousands of people every day. Trekking activities, spiritual tourists and all visit, and it's a very remote valley, very local, remote and difficult to access valley, which is visited by thousands of people every day. So this is one of the pictures of valley. While I was traveling, I took this. So this is the river which flows through the valley. It is called Bhagirathi River. It's actually a pre-source of the Ganges River. Yeah, so these are some peaks in this valley. They are very high peaks, like more than 6,000, 7,000 meters high. Okay, so this is one of my treks which I had done in this valley. Although it was a very difficult trek, I have very difficult memories of it, but this is to find this flower actually. This flower is called Sasuria obvaleta. So it is used in that area. Yeah, so this is the flower actually. So yeah, now coming to the most important part in this valley. This is the glacier. This is called Gangotri Glacier, and you see this is a valley type glacier which is covered by debris. And the glacial melt is releasing a river. It is called Bhagirathi River, which after confluence with another river forms into Ganges. So this is a very important glacier. Its length is approximately 30 kilometers. It's the second longest glacier in the Himalayas. And as I said, a source of water for billions of people. And although the location, I mean, it looks really beautiful, wonderful, amazing place to visit, but the story does not just end here. These are few close shots of the glacier. So yeah, as I've already briefed that this glacier is one of the largest, a length of 30 kilometers. The snout is named as Gomukh, the snout of the glacier, the opening from where the river is originating. And this originates through the glacier originates through peaks named Chaukhamba peaks, and which has an elevation of approximately 6,853 meters to 7,138 meters. And it is covered by debris. The 29% of glacier is covered by debris, and the snout of the glacier is very well studied in the past decades. So studies have, we'll see the snout first, yeah. So this is an image processed by the Earth Observation Center of the NASA. And we see the recession of this glacier. So in 1780, it was quite far back. Now it has, by 2001, it has receded to a lot. Probably 700-800 meters is the recession of the glacier. Yeah, so we'll go back to the point. Yeah, so the studies have reported that the glacier has receded by 720 meters during the period of 1971 to 1996. And the rate of recession is 28.8 meters per year. So it's very high. And on an area level, it goes up to approximately 0.41 square kilometer area, which is already lost by the year 2006. So at this alarming rate, this glacier would fully recede in a period of 41 years. So, I mean, if this continues at this rate in 41 years, maybe we have no glacier, you know. I'm not sure about it, but the current data says so. So, and climate change is indicated to be a plausible cause of this glacier recession. And you know what would happen if the glacier recedes like this? We would have floods, excessive flooding, sea level rise. The river directly goes into the sea, and then the problems with irrigation systems, problems with drinking water. As we know, millions of people are dependent on this river. So this would create a serious issue. So yeah, so these are some of the pictures of the glacier. So yeah, so this area also has significant flora, particularly the angiosperm flora, the flowering plants. Okay, so the name is not visible. Well, so yeah, so this is a plant called Anaphylis nepalensis. It is from my own observations. Maybe there is some error as well. I'm not sure, but it's my own observations in this valley. So this comprises of the Asteraceae family. Yeah. So this is Persicaria. This is Geranium. This is mostly found in the meadow areas of the alpine ecosystems. This is Epilobium latifolium. It's found in screes, rocks. This is Ephedra. So this is widespread in the alpine ecosystem of Himalayas. Impatiens glandulifera. Now we have Erinaria bryophylla, Polygonum affine. This is also very dominant as in the alpine areas of the Himalayas. Impatiens cabrida, and this is Verbascum thapsus. It is also a kind of a medicinal plant which is used for various purposes such as blood pressure control and stuff like that. Erysimum hieracifolium is of Brassicaceae family. This is a typical rose in the valley, in this valley. It's called Rosa webiana. And yeah, so this is Heracleum. Yeah, Cedrus deodara is a tree found in this valley, and it's a conifer basically, and it's pretty dominant in this area. Now we come to another valley. It's called Kedarnath Valley in the same state in India. It's also a very high altitude valley. The minimum elevation is above 3,000 meters. And this valley also has significant, importance. So there is the Kedarnath temple in this valley. So of course it is visited by the spiritual, tourism. So thousands of people visit this area. This is also a very remote valley, very high, and it's considered as a paradise for trekker. There are a lot of mountain trekking activities going on in this valley. It's an alpine environment with significant biodiversity, and mountains, rivers, glaciers are notable features in this valley. So we'll move forward. This is the Devdar tree. It's called Cedrus deodara, as I've already shown the cones. We have some flowering plants, Erigeron, Polygonum we already saw. Now let's come to the most important part. So this is a valley type glacier. this this glacier, valley type glacier, which has some debris, although it is very much visible. And this is very dominant in this valley, these kind of glaciers, and they have an entire system of rivers originating from it, and they have a precise position and a particular importance in the area. So what do you observe with this image? I would like to ask you guys. Yes. So the glacier has been cut for paving a road. So this is highly dangerous activity, because of the lack of understanding, simply applying engineering and ignoring all aspects of ecology. They have cut this glacier, and it's what would happen, this glacier would break. Eventually, if this continues, it would break and then cause flooding, damage to lives, because this is the tourist area, lots of tourists visit. It's hanging, it's already visible, it's already hanging, any little bit of rise in temperature could just melt this up and cause flooding from this glacier. So yeah, so this is a close-up view of this glacier. So this is the temple where people, the Kedarnath temple, where people visit. So it's at a very high altitude at 3,500 meters in height. So this area had a major disaster in 2013. So as I already said, many people visit the temple, and it's a very remote valley. So there was a flood, and that flood was so devastating that 6,000 people lost their lives. That was such a dangerous flood. So what happened was, on 16 June 2013, there was heavy rainfall in the region, and that was followed by a glacial lake which is above the temple area, and that lake was dammed by lateral moraines. Moraines, you would know, small rocks. It was just, that was the boundary of the lake, and the boundary was breached due to heavy rains, and it caused flash floods, and within minutes everything was submerged and badly destroyed. And as far as I remember from the news reports of that time, 700 to 800 people were never found. They've gone completely missing in the floods. And as I said, around 6,000 people had died in these floods. It damaged 30 hydroelectricity the stations, and 100,000 people were stranded waiting for help till they were evacuated from this area. So what triggered these floods? So I would like to put my emphasis on, so surface flooding and erosion was triggered due to heavy rainfall in the area, because the gradient is very steep. It's a very high valley, and soil would have got loosened up, and there was a flow of debris in this small village-like town. And then a landslide struck, and from a glacier nearby. And then the final catastrophe happened on 17 June when as I said, when the lake breached its boundaries, and massive volumes of water were released, which devastated all the downstream areas. So this is from some research article. So it says, although I'm not sure how to explain this, but so you see, the number 3 is the village where you saw the temple, and yeah, number 1 from here, erosion and cloud burst event had occurred, and yeah. So, and number 3 is the site of maximum devastation, which is this village where the devastation occurred, basically. And this, you see the lake, this is called Chora Bari Lake, which had breached its boundaries, and due to heavy rainfall and flash floods, it had triggered flash floods. And you can see this image is very small, although you can see it is all, the town is covered with debris. It is full of debris. Yeah. So I took this image, while I trekked in this area. So you can see the cut. the deep cut behind this town. So this was the area from where water had entered from the top, from both the sides, and devastated the town and the downstream areas going down. So these are some images of how the town was destroyed. All the houses were gone. Yeah, and see, this is the level of devastation you can see. This is the normal course of river. Normally the river is in this kind of situation. It's very low lying, but you see the landslides which have occurred up. So that was the level of river during the flooding event. Now let's come to another valley called Kashmir Valley in the state of Jammu and Kashmir in India. So these are some beautiful pictures for some nice aesthetics I had taken up. This is a hill station called Gulmarg in the same valley. So this is also a very important alpine ecosystem. So so this is some my personal experiences, in the area. So yeah, so now let's come to the important point of this valley. So this is situated in the Indian Himalaya. This Kashmir Valley is situated in the Indian Himalayan region. And what is most particular about this valley is that it is surrounded by a mountain range called Pir Panjal Ranges. So it is just like a flat land between the mountains. The mountains have encircled the valley like an oval shaped, structure. So, and it's a very major tourist destination in India. I mean, it's many people come to visit, but it includes high Himalayan peaks, glaciers, as similar with the other valleys as well. So natural disasters like flood, cloudburst, avalanches, earthquakes, and fires cause a lot of damage in the area. And it has already witnessed a rise of temperature to a scale of 1.2 degrees, which is even higher than the global temperature rise as indicated by the IPCC, as I said earlier. And flash floods, cloudburst are very natural disasters which are occurring. And what has changed is the intensity of these disasters have increased. The frequency has really increased in past few decades. So there was a flood in another temple area of the Kashmir Valley, which is very remote valley again. And thousands of people go for trekking, for sightseeing in the area. And 16 people were killed last year when flash floods occurred due to heavy rainfall on the higher reaches of the mountain. So I tried to study this flood myself. And so this is the area precisely on map. So yeah, so I tried to study this area with the use of remote sensing methods. So it's an active remote sensing called SAR, synthetic aperture radar. So Sentinel-1 gives this kind of a data. So it could be observed like the point you see there is the temple where people visit usually, and these are the mountain peaks, and you can see the valley is so remote, it's very narrow. And what happened, this is pre-disaster. So I have marked this area. It is completely clean, devoid of water. And now this is another image just right after the flash floods occurred. So these white patches show the presence of water. So the water, the rain, on the high elevations of the mountain triggered these floods. They caused the debris to move with the water and inside the valley, which led to many people just drowned in the flood and just passed away, and approximately I think 40 people were reported missing in the area. And these kind of events, the intensity of these kind of events have really increased in the last few decades. So this is, once I had also trekked in the area. So this is the kind of the valley, as you can see. It's a very remote area. And then again, the elevation is very high. The elevation is around 4,400 meters. And it's a very remote valley, highly sensitive to any kind of, changes which impacts the region. Okay, so we can come to another valley. So Ladakh, it is another Himalayan region in India. It's a cold desert and a very high altitude alpine ecosystem. So the basic, the city is located at the height of 3,500 meters. So, and it has a range of temperature which is extreme. It can go from -40 degrees to +40 degrees. Extremely low vegetation cover, glaciers, rivers. Yeah, most notable is the brackish water lakes in the area. There are several saltwater lakes in this region. Wetlands, high mountain passes particularly characterize this region. So this is from my own, again, is mostly my journey, my own treks. So this is from a view of glacier through a mountain called Mount Stock Kangri. I had trekked this. So there's a glacier and the elevation is approximately 5,500 meters. Yeah, so through this trek, there is a base camp and it's located around 5,000 meters. And this is the kind of view it looks. The cold desert, you see it's devoid of any trees, any significant vegetation. So through this trek, what was amazing that there was a lot of, again, flora found on this trek. So what I discovered, so these are some flowering plants which I discovered through this area. So this is Aragulus species, Carex, Crepis, Ephedra again, which is found, mostly it is dominant in the Himalayan regions of India. Lentopodium, lotus, mentha, potentilla, rhodiola. Rhodiola is a medicinal plant. It is used for treatment of, I think, to prepare medicines for asthma. Stellaria, urtica. Yeah, this is a kind of a grass which hurts. It has needles and it's really hurtful, and it is also found extensively in the Himalayas. So so let's now we see the main activities. Sure. So this is a formation of a glacial lake. The elevation in this area is more than 5,000 meters. So glacial lake formation occurs only when there is more heat in the area. Otherwise, it is supposed to be frozen. It's a glacier. This entire area is largely composed of glacier. So this is, while you see this is behind is the summit of the mountain, and the lake is forming because of the heating. Yeah. So this is a kind of in the valley where, so this area, why I'm mentioning, because this is also full of trekking people. It also receives thousands of tourists during the summer period. And as you see, it's a very remote valley, very high. Many people, this summit is also very dangerous. Many people also lose their lives while going to the summit because oxygen levels are quite low at this elevation, and particularly this dry desert. I don't know why, but it feels like more dry than other places in the Himalayas. And it's a very sensitive ecosystem, very fragile. And what is concerning in this area, what I have observed, is the formation of glacial lakes, which should not characterize this region because it's quite high, very cold, and largely characterized by the glaciers. Yeah, so this is the summit. When I was told to give my motivation as well as my experiences. So this is the summit while I had done this. So yeah, so this is the summit area. So in this region, I had also done some studies. As you know, it is a very very dry ecosystem. So usually the vegetation cover is very low. The vegetation cover of this area is less than approximately 0.11% of the geographical area of this region. So it is very much a desert. So I had studied a plant in this area called sea buckthorn. So I had studied the ecological parameters. So you see the Trans-Himalayan region in the background. So this is the valley, and these are the sea buckthorn shrubs. So this grows very extensively in the region, and something to this was earlier considered as a menace by the people. You know, it grew everywhere, and people would uproot it because there was no value of this shrub. But later on, through research, it came up to be very valuable because of its nutritional content, and various kind of things were prepared, like beverages from oils, jams, eatable stuff. So this became very popular after that and became a part of a major economic activity. However, the environmental parameters of the shrub were not explored in this region. So there is very scarce literature on understanding the environmental benefits of this shrub. So we wanted to study this to understand if we could plant this shrub on a area of 2,500 hectares to bring in some environmental benefits as well as the economic benefits from the berries of this plant. So these were some results we found. So we wanted to understand the carbon stocking potential of this shrub. So in the study, we found out, that it gave 74.15 megagrams per hectare, stand level carbon that included vegetation as well as soil. Although only vegetation carbon stock is very low, it's approximately 8.69 megagrams per hectare, total of 12.52, which includes the above ground and below ground components. Actually, yeah. So it came out to be very low, but this shrub has been studied extensively in the lowest plateau of China, which is near the Tibetan region of China, which has a similar landscape. And a lot of benefits were found, environmental benefits of the shrub were found, from soil amelioration to carbon stock reserves to combating desertification as well in the area. Although it is a desert, but still there are pockets of small vegetation and human habitations in the area where agriculture is also happening, even despite being a desert. However, the area still goes through, desertification spells. Some green area in this small, in this valley could turn into a desert, which is happening already. So this shrub was found to be really effective to combat desertification. So we tried to understand, so it was very much a preliminary study, not an extensive study, but we wanted to understand the basic information. Yeah. So this was the soil properties under this shrub, sea buckthorn. So yeah, under the soil, we found significant carbon stock, carbon reserves, and it varied from depth. So on the topmost layer, it is very much understood that the litter and other organic matter deposition increases the carbon content, and in the deeper layers, it reduces. And the nitrogen content as well is highest in the upper layers, and it reduces in the deeper layers. What is notable to find that in the most deeper layer, the nitrogen content is slightly higher than the middle layer, which is 0.3 to 0.6 meters. So why is that? Because it is a plant which has nodules, root nodules, which can fix nitrogen. So Frankia, a bacteria, resides in those root nodules. So that's why it has some nitrogen fixing properties as well. Yeah, so this is the work going on although we did destructive harvest, but that time we had the only option. We wanted to know the precise, we wanted to have the precise understanding of the data of sea buckthorn. So we did destructive harvest. So these are the shrubs which were felled for the study. Yeah. So I don't know why. Why I'm talking about sea buckthorn. I'm sorry. Yeah, so sea buckthorn, as I said, this is a cold desert, so it is a significantly important plant. For it could have immense environmental benefits and as well as economic benefits. So that's why this is a very important shrub in the region. So studying it was very rewarding. So studies have carried on a long-term scale to understand more about this shrub, which is highly beneficial to the cold desert. So yeah, from my personal experience now, coming up to this, yeah, so I had varied responsibilities while I worked in the area. So conservation of wildlife as well. So this is a golden eagle, Aquila chrysaetos. So it was injured, and very weak. So it could have died. So we had to take it into rescue and then release it when it was well enough. Yeah, snow leopard. This was my most interesting phase of work in the Ladakh area. So snow leopard, Panthera and unsia is the scientific name. And as we know, this is the top apex predator of the Ladakh region. So it is mostly found in very high elevations, and it is a very important animal. I cannot term it as a keystone species because I do not know about it if it is such, but it is a important species to keep the herbivores into check, from rising from their population would rise too much if it's not there. And what is the problem with conservation of snow leopards in the area? The most problem again sticks to climate change, that warming temperatures. As we know, snow leopards live at high elevation, they prefer colder climate, but since it has started to heat up more, their prey base has reduced and they attack the human habitations, human livestock. So the domesticated animals, so they come into direct conflict with the human beings. And what used to earlier happen, that they used to be killed, humans would kill the snow leopards. So the conservation was really difficult, and it is one of the species, very important to be conserved in the area. So uh, what what steps were taken was that, a compensation used to be generally provided to people who had lost livestock and who bared losses due to snow leopard. And slowly this boomed up, and now the snow leopard is doing quite well in the area. And yeah, this is one. It's a baby snow leopard actually. It's just 8 months old, and it lost its mother, and it was attacked by another snow leopard in the eye. So you can see the eye is a bit damaged, and as many of you would know that these animals cannot survive in the wild without their mothers. At least they need 2 years with their mother to understand hunting and understand all other implications of staying in the wild. So it could have died, so we had to take it into with us, and so it was well. Yeah, so coming back to the way forward, so as all these aspects which I've discussed is largely going up to the to the implication of the impacts of climate change in the Himalayan ecosystems, in the alpine ecosystems more precisely. So we've seen floods, we've seen anthropogenic activities, cutting up of glaciers. So these have really are devastating the Himalayan ecosystems. So, and as we know, India is a developing country, so the more emphasis is on development instead of more focusing on the conservation of ecology and environment. So it has really put the populations to the peril, and these disasters have rise so much that every year there are incidents of people dying, because of the natural disasters. Although it is also well known that natural disasters like flood would occur, they do, but the intensity has been exacerbated by the human activities. And what is more I'm sorry, yeah, what is more I wanted to say that because of these activities, I mean, people are intensively losing their lives. And the one disaster which I said where 6,000 people lost their lives was way back in 2013. However, the hanging glacier you have seen is a picture of 2015, in the same area. So People are, it cannot be said that, it is improving. They're still going on the same line. So some necessary steps are required, to adapt to the system. The natural disasters would continue, but the intensity could be reduced. And moreover, to save lives, there could be adaptation measures in check, which minimizes the losses during these disasters. So what India has started doing in the Himalayan region. So based on India has a agreement, India has signed the Paris Agreement, the COP 21 in 2015. So there is a nationally determined contributions, if you guys would know. So a state has to reduce emissions, which is supposed to be a reduction of 33% of the emissions intensity of their growth development, their gross domestic product, the GDP. So you have to give certain commitments. So these are called nationally determined contributions. So a state action plan on climate change has to be framed to adapt to this situation and as well improve the condition. So we started working on a policy document called State Action Plan on Climate Change, which included aspects on adaptation, mitigation components, and the most important, the backbone of that, I would say, is called vulnerability assessment. So vulnerability assessments is the understanding of which points are more at risk, which are more predominantly vulnerable to a certain kind of a hazard. To understand that gives us more precise information what adaptation measures could be taken into a certain situation. For example, for floods. So now the Himalayan states of India are studying the vulnerability hotspots in the mountains, and particularly for sites having human habitation and tourism. So this climate adaptation strategy is being formulated precisely for vulnerable regions to minimize the loss of lives during disaster situations, as I've already mentioned all this. So what has been missing so far? What has been missing so far in the Indian Himalayan region is that the maximum emphasis is laid on the post-disaster remedies. After the disaster has occurred, then how to evacuate people, how to resettle, how to provide medicines or primary care. So maximum emphasis was laid on that. But a pre-disaster planning or an emphasis was never paid on that. And with reference to climate change, no extensive studies were made, that what to do in such situations, what is driving this kind of a situation. So we started working on a policy which is more the State Action Plan on Climate Change, which has a component of vulnerability assessment. Through that, we come to know that which areas are more vulnerable, and we incorporate into the adaptation planning. So now more emphasis is laid on the pre-disaster planning, so that the scale of losses can be minimized. Now, considering the alarming climate change situation, the flood management has to be based on a comprehensive climate vulnerability assessment of floods. So now we know that there are advanced techniques of modeling which can really predict and show you on a virtual scale what kind of flooding could happen in which kind of an area. So to understand the components such as hydrological character, the temperature, the glacier features, rainfall, gorges, slopes, cloudburst events, landslides, avalanches, as well as the socio-economic status of the resident population is also very important to consider. For these are some basic parameters for a vulnerability assessment in alpine ecosystems of Himalayas. For example, it's a very simple relation. If you have a good presence of health infrastructure in a certain area, a good road connectivity, a good evacuation infrastructure, so it is well understood that in case of a disaster, the losses would be minimum, and people would suffer lesser in that kind of a situation. And so vulnerability assessments should include these concepts, as well as advanced remote sensing techniques. I showed you a very basic remote sensing technique to understand the post-flooding situation, which areas had the presence of water and from what direction it was coming up. So this was a very basic work which I had showed you, but this can go more advanced. You could see in you could see it in a timeline of kind of a video kind of a modeling from where flood is coming, where water comes up, which is the most dangerous point. So what kind of protection could be taken for this kind of a situation? So remote sensing techniques could be really used for modeling these alpine valleys in the Himalayas. Then the vulnerability assessment should be current as well as projected on future time scale. So what does it mean? It means that currently, what is the situation of what points are more vulnerable? What are the hotspots of vulnerability in the alpine ecosystems at a current time scale? So that comes from the past data. But through the modeling techniques, you can as well project it for a time scale of, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, as well as 50 years. So there are protocols for that through which you can really, project on a future scale about the climate situation. For example, that comprises parameters such as what would be the temperature in the next 30 years per se, and what would be the extent of glacier in a certain region in next few decades. Combining these information, you can really model and understand that what is the what intensity of flooding, for example, could be expected in a certain area. So these concepts should be taken, are being incorporated, as well as these now, like from my observation is that there is in India, we have a particular disaster management plan for this kind of situation. But as I said, that the most of the components of this disaster management plan incorporates the post-disaster planning. So now from my observation is that pre-disaster emphasis should be more in these kind of plans. Now, most important point is, in addition to the policy development, policy can be made on the papers, but the implementation is the most important step, and where it lacks is implementation. So that is the most difficult point in all this process. So unless it's not implemented well on ground, the resilience cannot be built. Yeah, sorry. So this is the vulnerability profile of the Himalayan states. So this is the current vulnerability of the area, and it shows a state level vulnerability. So we do not have the very precise vulnerability in this area. So I mean, my idea of this seminar was to give a basic idea of the alpine ecosystem of the Himalaya, to understand what threats and challenges it is facing currently with my own experience, what I have seen through myself, and to understand what steps could be taken forward in this direction. So yeah, so this was all for this presentation. I tried to keep it brief, although we can go into much details of this, but this is it for today. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you all. If you have questions.
Gaurav, thank you very much for your seminar. I don't know if you can see me or hear me. We are traveling now.
Yes, Professor, I can see you. Yes.
Okay, so it was very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing insights regarding your beautiful country. And of course, we realize that we share the same challenges. And so with different level of capability of giving answers to these problems. However, I hope that other students from the master degree will follow your example and decide to participate actively to the series of Youth4Mountains. You opened, officially opened. And so thank you very much. If there are some comments, some questions, please. I try to stay connected and follow the question and answers session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. If there are any questions.
Questions online, so in chat, write in chat or open microphone if you want.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. It's incredibly interesting. I didn't know many things about the Alpine system in ecosystem in India. I understand that the problem is very big, and so you said the politics is the first point that should address the overall problem. But my question is, for young people as you in India, the local people, what do you think they can do in a local space beside the politics decisions that should be taken by the governments and so on? Which kind of suggestion, which kind of hints can you give to the people that lives there in order to try to go in the good directions against the impact? And is the local people aware of the dimensions of the overall problem, or maybe they are not so much?
Thank you, Professor, for the question. Yeah, so I would say the local people are more aware about the problems than the governments, or than the people, than the political class, because they are the ones who suffer, and if we talk to them, I have interviewed them, so they are very well aware that, in last few decades, the situation was more stable and not so difficult as now it is going on, and the solution which should be precisely is to build more and more awareness. And I would say, in my view, from what I have found, I see local people are much more aware, those who are the inhabitants of the area. But the problem is with the influx of people which is coming in these remote valleys, with the tourists, for example, the trekking community which enters, so more awareness has to come in that domain, those who visit these areas, because that creates the maximum pressure on these ecosystems. And then awareness should be of a level that they should be able to understand at least the brief aspects of the ecosystem and what kind of dangers are that. For example, when these 6,000 people died in the floods, what I observed, that there should be a limit of how many people can go in one day at a site like this. From India and abroad as well. What is most surprising is that, at times in valleys, I have seen more people from abroad than from India. But that does not make a difference, because the people coming from India or abroad, the problem is that, there should be a limitation on how many people, how much resources you can use in 1 year or in 1 month so that is something. And local people, what they need to do, for example, in this Ladakh region I showed you, it's a cold desert, what is occurring, there is a big city called Leh in this area where I used to work earlier. So it is coming up with huge, grand hotels, and it is putting up acute pressure on the, for example, water for heating, and it's a very fragile area, and making it as commercialized as a capital city, for example, like Milan or something, it will be devastating, and that area as well had experienced a flash flood some time back. And so awareness has to come with the balance of development. It has to be sustainable. What is the carrying capacity of an ecosystem? That should be considered. And local people need to interrupt at this point, because they are the people who provide the services, so they need to understand here that what they can do from their side is to resist that level of change. I'm not saying they should not do economy or they should not, do business, but at what scale and what is sustainable, that is something they need to understand. And they very well understand. It's not that they do not understand. They are very much aware of the situation. However, when the economics plays, when finances come into picture, so that gets more weightage than the ecology and the protection of environment.
Any other question? Comment?
I was wondering if after your research that I think you explained to someone else more than us, something has changed about what you were talking. So a certain limit of people going to the valley you told us about, and what you were explaining just a few minutes ago. Thank you.
I was trying to explain, as you would have observed in the pictures, that these are very remote valleys. They are very short spaces and they are very fragile as well. They are located at elevations which are like more than 4,000 meters, 5,000 meters. Very fragile. Why I'm saying, because any small disturbance creates a huge impact in these areas. And you saw that hanging glacier, for example. That was an example of a road being built for people to trek easily. So I was trying to say that there should be a limitation on how many people can enter in a certain area in that remote valley in one day, for example. There should be a limit for 1 month, how much, or for 1 year, how much should be, because for example, when there was the floods, when 6,000 people died, if there was a limit per se, 100 people for a day, the scale of disaster would not have been as much. It would have been reduced. And then it also puts acute pressure on the resources. For example, water, heating, all these resources, there is excessive pressure. So this further drives challenges and vulnerabilities in those remote valleys. So my point was there has to be some regulation. And there is a term in ecology called carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is a term which means that any ecosystem, it has a limit, a certain limit till which it can take. And once, if you go beyond it, it starts degrading, it starts depleting. So the use of resources should be within the carrying capacity. Of course.
Very interesting. The other question I have in mind is, which is the situation on the opposite side of the border of the Alps? I mean, of the Himalayan mountains, the China, the Nepal situation. Is it similar to the Indian side, and do they have the same problems as I expect? And do they have the same politics? Do they work together? Because when you are on the border, you may have the problem to make the two politics work in the same directions. Sometimes it's not easy.
Indeed, Professor, there are similar problems because the geography is similar, the boundaries are only political.
So
but
also
of course, Professor. So for example, you give the example of Nepal. So Nepal is also facing similar issues. It has huge influx of tourists. Now mountains, there are several mountains which have been converted entirely into towns. The mountain slopes is like now you would see no forest, nothing, it's only human habitation. So they are also facing similar problems. There are landslides, the intensity of landslides has increased, the flooding events have increased, there is so much loss of lives, So in Nepal, I'm very much aware the situation is very much similar. In China, the difference is that China is more similar to the ecosystem of Ladakh, the cold desert I showed you, because it is a part of Tibetan plateau in that area. So, and there is more politics also in the region. For example, most of the rivers originate from these. The Himalayas is also referred to as water towers of Asia. So the rivers are originating in these regions. So politics is such that, for instance, a very important river which travels around 3,000 kilometers approximately. It's called Brahmaputra River in eastern Himalayas. So it originates in the Tibetan plateau, which is controlled by China right now. And so there is a policy, there are some agreements that you have to let use the downstream water. You cannot entirely restrict the flow. But then this is also happening that a lot of dams have come up, so it restricts the flow of water. However, then there are dangers of flood. Sometimes when it breaches, there are devastating floods in the area, which is usually it happens in the eastern Himalayas of India, in the valleys. So these kind of activities, I mean, in China also, I do not know about the governance in China, but from the outside perspective, from how I can see about one incident, as I said, excessive dams on the river. But I'm not very much aware about the internal situation, how they do it. But in Nepal, yes, I have visited Nepal. I have never been to China, but Nepal I have seen. So it's very similar kind of a situation.
I was wondering if you are from one of these valleys or one mountain areas you quoted, or you are from a city.
No, I'm from a city. I'm from a plain flat city. Is this presentation open? I'll show you. I'm from here. So you see all these yellow areas have the mountain area. These are the mountain states, and I come from, you see the cursor here. So this is a entirely flat area. However, the Himalayas are not very far, because this is the Nepal region. This is also Himalayas, but it's not in the Indian Himalayan region. So it's administratively different. So it's not very far. And the state in which I reside, so here we have all the rivers coming from the Himalayas in the Nepal. And each year we have devastating floods. Each year we have devastating floods, and which causes a lot of damage but then again, there are various issues, anthropogenic driven, climate change driven, administrative problems, so these comprise.
Other question? Okay. From home.
Is there any question online?
Yeah, it is recorded and it is available on our website unimontagna.it. Okay, if there aren't any questions, thank you, Gaurav, for your presentation and for your very interesting presentation of another reality. And thank you to all to have participated this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I'm very glad and we appreciate this opportunity. And I hope to do it more often if I have a chance.
If you want.
There is a lot of things to share.
If you want, when you want. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.